But I thought next thing I'd do is get the sway bar in here. So this stuff's been sitting around for a while already. So I got the Coyote Swap sway bar relocation from LMR, some Prothane bushings, and then that's a Steeda sway bar. So I'm going to work on getting that up under the car. I realize I do not have end links for that. So yeah, I'll get those ordered after I get that kind of up in place. Hoping that I can kind of get things situated enough that I can figure out what's going on or what I need to do for that. So I'll work on getting that installed. Again, I'm not going to go through all the installation procedures, as LMR has a good instructional video on how to install their relocation kit. So I'm just going to get started on that. It did say about, like when I watched the video, to put the sway bar back as close as you can to the struts, but I think everything's going to sit kind of inboard there. So I'll have to get things figured out once I get, they say to install the brackets on the sway bar first and then kind of hold it up in place to kind of figure out where it needs to go in the car. Drill holes, and I think you just fish up these brackets here up through a hole in the frame here, or maybe you can pop it in the side here, but I'll get that figured out. I'm not too concerned about it. I watched the LMR video and they said, well, you might need help. And I could get my son out here, but it just seems like it'd be a lot of hassle, like trying to line up the eyelets and the sway bar there with the eyelets and the A-arms. So I thought, well, I'm going to have my A-arms sitting pretty level. They said you want to have the sway bar sitting level. I think the ends of the sway bar when the vehicle's at ride height, I think is the suggestion. So anyone, please correct me if I'm wrong. So what I'm doing here is just figuring out the center point between the new sway bar support in the center of the eyelet there. Then I'm going to drop some spots and use like a plumb bob and take some spots and mark them on the floor. And then figure out how much forward I have to go to mount those up. And hopefully I can get everything to line up and work. So that's my thought process for doing all this. And we'll see what we can make work. So before I go in for the night, just thought I'd show what I've done. So what I tried to do was measure from the center line of the sway bar here, in that general vicinity on both sides, to the center of the eyelet for the in link for the sway bar on both sides. And I measured the distance center to center here. I got all my numbers here, so it's about roughly, it seemed like every time I measured, I think it was this side was just a tick shorter than this side, but it's roughly, it floats right around 6 inches center to center. So then what I did was got the old plumb bob out, and I dropped and just marked off coordinates for 4 sides of each of these holes here onto the floor on both sides of the car. And then I measured 6 inches forward, drew a line across the floor, measured 6 inches forward, and then I marked where the inside of the frame rail was on both sides. And then I actually held the plumb bob up so it was on the center of that. And I actually marked on the bottom of each frame rail where it's centered up. So hopefully, if everything works right, the distance between the center of these holes, actually the one inward is maybe just ever so slightly forward, but basically from the center of this hole to that line on the bottom of the frame should be 6 inches on both sides. So I'm probably way overthinking this, way overdoing it, but this is kind of how I'm doing it. All right, it's been a while since I posted or recorded anything here. So just the joys of piecing something together. So I got this, it's a Steeda sway bar. Well, then you can see I got the old truck timing cover in here. Well, when you go to put, I did all my lines on the floor. Then I drew some lines up here in the frame. So you can see here, there's 2 long lines. That's where the bolt holes need to be to have a vertical, straight up and down, whatever, in link. Well, then when you do that, it takes us into the sway bar and presses up that way because it hits the back side of this oil filter. So I think I was getting ahead by using the Mustang oil filter adapter, but I think instead I'm gonna go, and I did some looking and I kind of mapped off, and I looked at, I got my F-150 outside, and I looked at how that oil filter kind of sat out under here. I should actually go get another picture of it from underneath. Anyway, but I think I'm gonna switch to an F-150 adapter because I think it kind of comes down and puts the oil filter kind of up over here in this area. But I'm going to do a little more research, a little more looking, and I think I'm going to get rid of the Mustang oil filter adapter housing and go to an F-150 again. So back to eBay I go. I think I'll do a little more test fit up. I think it was hitting the sway bar right at the bottom of here. I might check that out a little bit again, but I'm going to compare the F-150 timing cover to the Mustang timing cover, see if that F-150 adapter will even fit around it, which I'm hoping it will. But I noticed there is some material here that you could probably trim away if need be to make it fit off of that timing cover. But hopefully it won't come to that, but we'll find out. All right, another thought that I had was it's like just the sway bar is barely bumping into the side of the oil filter here. So I thought, well, even if you could move the sway bar down about an inch, inch and a half, maybe even 2 inches, but I think maybe an inch would clear. Inch and a half would give a little more clearance. 2 inches probably be no definite, no doubt that it would clear. But then I could build a spacer here to put both those brackets to. And then I did a little more thinking about that. Well, I want to have that sitting parallel to the ground and have these about parallel to the ground. And I was doing some measuring, like from this arm to here. So from there to there is about 4 inches to the edge of that sway bar. And then like measuring out from this bracket. So measuring out from this bracket here to the frame rail, I was using a level before. I can't do it with one hand. But it's about 8 inches from the bottom of the frame rail to the top of this bracket that the end links bolt into. So that gives you about 4 inches left. So anything you take away from that 4 inches, and then I'm gonna have to use this outer hole, which is like just a 1/2 inch out. So I thought that would be the best one, considering this will be sitting level. So if it droops and as it compresses, that hole will get closer to the frame rail. So I figured it would be better to use that outside hole. Well, you got 4 inches clearance here. So you'd have anything you'd add to here, you'd take away from that 4 inches for the length of that end link. So I'm gonna do some thinking about that, see if it can find some spacers or something like that that's already on the market, or what I can do here. So playing around with either spacing that sway bar down some more, which, well, it's already spaced this much with these LMR relocation kit for that. And so then it'd be spaced down even that much further. Or if I just use those and get that F-150 oil filter adapter. So I'm going to do some thinking here. Anyway, I've been jumping around the last few weeks. I started working on this sway bar beforehand. The last I showed, I was talking about the oil filter being in the way of the sway bar. So what I ended up doing, since I got the Mustang bracket on there right now for the oil filter, I'm going to pull that off of there. I got myself one of these F-150. So this is supposed to be a Gen 1 F-150 oil filter bracket, adapter, whatever you want to call it. Oh, found that on eBay. So I'm going to bolt this guy up to the engine and slop the oil filter on there, and then see if we have room for that sway bar then after that. So I won't show any of the work for that. It's just a matter of, I think I'll pop the filter off, get a catch can underneath there. I'll pop my sensor. Well, actually, I'll pop the sensors out later once I make sure that that bracket actually fits and clears. Otherwise, I got some other figuring to do. I thought about maybe doing a remote oil filter, but I'm not 100% sure I want to do that. But I guess time will tell, and I'll dink around with that and figure out what a good solution is. All right, guys, so I got the F-150 style filler neck here, or the adapter neck. So it's not good news. I was hoping it would kind of, I wish it would have sucked that oil filter up further that way. I got that bracket on here now, and I got marks in the bottoms of the frame rail here for where the sway bar should go. But so that's about where it should go. And as you can clearly see, it's up against the, well, here, let's try. Yeah, because the sway arm needs to drop the rear of the bars down, or the rear of the bar down. I kind of got it in its spot there, but yeah, it needs to spin it up further that way, and it's not moving anywhere because it's all up against that. Yeah, it's still just, you'd have to mount it about an inch down. If I'm gonna do that, I'd almost rather have the Mustang style neck back on there. So I'm gonna play around with this some more. Pop the Mustang adapter back on here. Pop the oil filter back on it too. Then snug it all down so I don't forget to torque it later. And yeah, wondering if I'll have to do a remote filter so that there's room for the sway bar where it's mounted here, because I did a bunch of marking up, plumb bobs and everything, trying to figure out the gap from the A-arm up to the sway bar to keep everything kind of parallel. Just a lot of work. Oh well. That's the Fox body game. All right, so I'm messing around with this anti-sway bar some more. I'm just juggling back and forth between the Mustang oil filter location and the F-150 oil filter location, and it got to be too much of a hassle just trying to hold it up, so I ended up finding some tie-down straps, and I stuck some 2x4s on here. I figured I'd have to space this sway bar down 2 inches in order to get clearance for the oil filters, even independent of which oil filter it is. So I got this A-arm sitting about level, which is I think would be about the right height I'm looking for. This is sitting about level, so assuming this is 1.5 inch, and I go to 2 inch, that leaves about 2 inches of space here for an in link, which I think by the time you get all the little rubber bushings and everything in there, you don't have it wouldn't be much of an in link, just be bushing, just a little bit of shim and bushing. But I don't know, maybe that would be the way to go. But just in looking at this, with this sitting about level, so climb down on the creeper here. So with that A-arm sitting about level, this sway bar sitting about level, and here's the F-150 oil filter. I haven't taken the plastic off of here, but so with that sitting about level, there's maybe a 1/4 inch of clearance here. So as soon as that suspension would droop down about an inch that it would smash into this oil filter. So even with a 1/2 inch clearance, well, then you'd be getting to a 3/4 inch gap. So maybe that might be okay, but I don't like maybe. So I think I'm going to veer away from this. I'm going to try popping the Mustang adapter back on here and seeing how that looks, and also looking and comparing the height of this sway bar to the ground versus the K member and everything else that's back here. So I'm going to do a little more looking, but I'm almost tempted to go back to the Mustang oil filter housing and doing a remote filter and mounting the filter out on the frame rail or something somewhere here. So that's what I'm struggling with right now. So hopefully by the end of the night here, I'll have some direction on where I want to go with that as far as the filter goes, so that I can get this thing mounted under here. All right, I did some more figuring here. So I did. You have to really excuse all the rigging up I did. I just wanted to try to space this down some more, and I'm just putting stuff in the way here to kind of simulate dropping this 2 inches. Well, then you only have 2 inches for an in length there, which by the time that thing swivels up and down, there's a lot of movement there, I think, to take up in a short little 2 inch extension. So that's one thought. Another thought too, okay, I'll wait. Another thought is too, with this thing at ride height, the sway bar is a little higher than the K member, but then as soon as the suspension articulates, then this will drop and be the lowest point of contact. So that's reason number 2, why I'm thinking. And let's see here. And reason number 3 is it's still very close to the oil filter here, even with it dropped, to make up like mimic it being 2 inches lower. But it's still really close to this, and then I dropped this down an inch in the back to simulate the suspension being at full droop, and you'd probably have to undo the sway bar, or at least loosen up bolts and try to swing that out of the way a little bit every time just to take that oil filter off. So I'm going to do some looking, and we're going to do a remote oil filter there. So I think I'm kind of at the point now where I've made enough decisions that I'm going to go with the sway bar mounted directly to the frame. So I'm going to get some in links ordered, and I think I'm going to need about a 4-inch in link, because I think I figured this was 2 with dropping this 2. All right, so I'm working on getting this sway bar installed, and as I mentioned before, I'm going to have to do an oil filter relocation kit on there. But I'm working on getting this sway bar kind of mocked up in place. I was going to have my son help me, but then I figured I could use some ratcheting tie down, so I got them just kind of hooked on the fender, hooked on and looped around the sway bar. And I'm trying to get this thing positioned 4.5 wells side to side, and I think I got it pretty good. Each of these brackets are kind of mounted closer to the inside edge of the frame rail on both sides, but that seems to be about what has it centered. So actually I might double check with my plumb bob here, but I went and started to mark off where the holes were on these brackets, and I thought, well, I'm going to double check this. So I had dropped a plumb bob from the control arm, the eyelets for the anti-sway bar, and marked it off on the floor, and then tried to mark it off from I forget what my measurement was, but I had kind of parallel from the line that I made for the sway bar bracket, and then what it should be for the anti-sway bar. So, well, from the control arm to where the mount is for the anti-sway bar. That's what I'm trying to say. But I thought, well, I'll double check this one more time. Well, I went to double check from where I had originally marked it there, and it was like lining up this plumb bob with the center of the string here to the back edge of that hole. And I've lifted this A-arm up and set it down, and it doesn't make a whole lot of difference as far as where this is in the travel. But ended up having to bump this ahead just a little bit, as you might be able to see there. But I checked it on both sides, and it seems to me like this side I had marked pretty good. I think I did. I think it's pretty much where it was. I actually bumped it back just a hair on this side and bumped it forward. Gosh, half an inch or so on this side. So, but at least now I think I got this anti-sway bar for the in-link pretty much parallel with that. I'm going to use the outer hole on each of these, and it'll actually push the in-link out just a hair, but I figure that was better because I'm going to have this A-arm mounted kind of level, so it'll arc up and down, well, or up and down, so it'll always kind of be sucking that in-link in at the bottom throughout its travel. But I'm going to double check one more time here and make sure I got this thing mounted side to side decent on here. Then I'm going to mark and start drilling some holes. So I got the sway bar up in place now. It's all bolted up. Like I said, I had to readjust my holes a little bit, got those drilled, and then I ended up fishing that through this bottom hole in the frame rail, and I just used some duct tape or Gorilla tape and taped a pretty stiff wire to the back end of it and just kind of fished it up in there, and that bracket with the 2 bolts on it, and dropped them in place on both sides. It actually went pretty smoothly. Once I kind of figured it out, I didn't tape it on good enough on this side, so I actually had to fish it back out of the frame rail. So that took a little bit of time, but once I kind of got it figured out, both of them dropped in place pretty quickly, nicely and easily. So I do have in links coming from LMR. One concern I do have though is this sway bar is really close to that air conditioning compressor. So I think one thing I'm kind of thinking with that, sway bar is really close to that, so maybe I'll make like a 1/2 inch spacer just to space that down a little bit, and that'll give me the room that I need. It's not going to put that sway bar too low, not going to be in the way of hitting the ground, hopefully. But I'm thinking that's what I might do. Maybe a 1/4 inch spacer, because it doesn't take much. And that's where it's touching. So it's not angled down too much. Maybe I'll wait and see once I have the in links in and get them mounted up the way I need them. Maybe that'll determine if I need to space it down at all. But it looks like there might be room. The only other thing I'd worry about is this clip right here that will eventually have something in there so I can run the AC. Other than that, I think it's looking, yeah, I think that should be pretty good. It's back far enough. But other than that, I think it's looking pretty good. Like I said, I'll wait till I have the in links in here, and then work on getting those in links set up right, see how close it is to that AC compressor, and go from there.